Welcome, everyone, to the Culinary Now podcast. I'm Matt Britt.
And I'm Jamie Schick.
And today on the pod, we are blessed, privileged to be joined by two Masters in Art and Teaching, MAT students here at Johnson & Wales, Emma Rotondo and Griffin Valentine. Griff and Emma, welcome to the pod.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are so excited to chat with you today, and I think we'll just start right in. Griffin, I'll start with you. Will you tell everyone a little bit about why you wanted to go into culinary education?
Absolutely. So I think it kind of started, I think my journey towards education started pretty much as soon as I was able to talk. Both of my parents are teachers in some way. My dad's a coach at a middle school, and my mom's been a special educator for the entirety of her career. And then I also have a twin sister who's a special educator as well. So I've always just kind of been around the education cycle, and I think that going through culinary school, I was looking for something long term. I knew that I didn't want to entirely, work in kitchens forever, but I knew that I wanted to do something with food. And I ended up becoming a peer tutor at the request of one of the chefs that I had at the time, and I just think I fell in love with it. I had through that job found out about the master's program, and immediately applied. And there's no looking back. I've enjoyed literally every single second of the program.
Emma, did you want to share
Yeah.
why you're passionate about culinary education and chose to go into it?
Yeah, I think my passion for education kind of stemmed from my passion for being a student. When I myself was a student, I just love being in the classroom environment. I love learning. I love education. And teaching has been something I've always been interested in. When I was younger, in middle school, high school, before I realized that I could actually make pastry a career for myself, I was always kind of had teaching on the back burner. And then when I was here at Johnson & Wales doing my undergrad, and I learned that they had this master's in teaching that had the culinary education track, I thought it was just the perfect combination of my two kind of passions in life. So similar to Griffin, I applied for the MAT program immediately after completing my undergrad, so I was able to start the following year. And we're about 23 days out from graduation right now, which is crazy to think, but I know I completely agree with everything Griffin has said. I have really loved my experience through the program so far.
I think it's so smart that you went right into your master's program after graduation, because Chef Britt and I both waited like 10 something years after graduation. It's so much harder to go back
more than 10 years.
Yeah, than to just continue on. So I think that was really smart that you both just went right into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's crazy. I feel like I never even had I had two roommates who both graduated at the same time as me and went straight into, the industry. And there was never really a moment where I wanted to go straight into industry. I knew that I had wanted to go straight into the school, like the master's program, because the industry can be pretty gruesome, and I just didn't see how it was going to be possible for me to take myself out and go back to school. So I commend both of you for doing the opposite.
Yeah, seriously.
So you both mentioned sort of this, liking the program and liking the fact that you stuck in school and kind of continued on. And it seems, just kind of as you're both sort of glowing through the screen here, you've had a positive experience. I would say that's probably connected in some way to the people that you've been working with more recently. And knowing both of your sort of university chaperone's the wrong word, but just your chefs that you're sort of doing your student teaching under, both of which have been on this pod, Maura and Wyatt. Can you speak a little bit about what you've learned specifically from them that you think has made you a better teacher?
It's really hard to think of kind of one thing or an overarching thing that I have learned, because I feel like I have learned so much, not only surrounding teaching, but surrounding pastry in general, which will just make me a better teacher. But Chef Matheny is just so talented and so passionate for both aspects, for pastry and for education. And just being around that environment and that energy, I feel like I'm kind of just soaking it up. Like my excitement and my passion for teaching, the way she expresses it is kind of just reflected back into myself. And she just clearly cares so much about learning and about making the opportunities that the students need to be the most successful in class. So that has something I have really learned from her and really want to try to implement in my own practice, is that I know we have a very rigid and rigorous kind of course schedule, but whatever ways I can kind of modify that or accommodate it to ensure all of my students have the best learning experience possible is really important to me.
Yeah, I'll piggyback right off of Emma. I didn't know Chef McGuire coming into the program. I wasn't in the C4 program, and that's where he pretty much spends most of his time. But I've always had like an interest in fine dining, and I knew that that was just kind of the curriculum that I wanted to teach, or at least I really wanted to be a part of that class. So I sought him out specifically for that purpose. But just like Emma says, the passion that every single instructor has at Johnson and Wales, in their own in their own little world, whether it be chocolates or plated desserts or casual concepts or fine dining, you know, every single person is incredibly smart and incredibly talented, and it just reflects, not only in the practice towards the students, but the collaboration between peers. I spent a lot of time not only with Chef McGuire, but with other clinical educators that have MAT student TAs, or other chefs, just to get feedback from them on what I'm doing. Because end all be all, the university is has a culture of collaboration, and it only makes everybody better. But speaking specifically towards Chef McGuire, I've had an incredible wild ride with him. There's so much reflection and and revision and feedback that goes into the fine dining course, um, that I've, again, the same as Emma, really been able to work on my own skills, alongside working with students. And I think that that's really helped invigorate my students too, to show them that the people in front of them, the educators that they're learning under, are also lifelong learners. And if they aren't, maybe they shouldn't be there. And that's just, again, that's my own philosophy. But Chef McGuire and I become pretty close. Some would even say friends. Who knows? But it's been incredible.
It's
Yeah, I
funny
have nothing but good to say.
It's funny you say that, Griffin, because I didn't realize this, but we're kind of in a similar situation where I did not have Chef Matheny at all during my time here as an undergrad
Hmm.
student, but I ranked her as my number one choice to be my clinical educator because I had just heard of like her reputation throughout the program. And I've learned so much from her. And I was kind of nervous at first because I felt like I had this pressure to present myself to the students, but also to kind of present myself to her because she had never had
Totally
me as a student. She didn't know what my work was like. So it was kind of this pressure on both sides. But I feel like maybe you'll agree with me on this. It kind of just motivated me to try harder and to be better.
agreed. Yeah, and it's a saving grace because they don't know you as a student, so they get to look at you as a collaborative
Yeah.
peer, and they don't
Yeah.
have a preconception for sure.
Mhm.
That's so interesting because I would have thought, like, because you both have somewhat mimicked or turned into a small portion of Wyatt and Mora, and that's a good thing, right? But I would have sworn that based on your just sort of organic, like, absorption into their teaching philosophy in their classrooms, you would have known them for a long time. But it's so crazy that you both came in essentially not knowing them, which I thought was
Hmm.
interesting.
Mhm.
Is there something that surprised you about them, having not known them in advance? When you came in, you were like, "Holy shit!" Like maybe I'm looking at Griffin a little bit more because like I know why.
Me too.
It's like I didn't realize that this was sort of
No,
the internal
I
ticking.
yeah, it's a fun question. I mean, I didn't really know, like, it's such an interesting thing because I didn't really know anything about Chef McGuire. Um, I it surprised me how kind of he can kind of snap back and forth from being like super rigid and then super friendly, and like super industry and then super educator all at the same time. Like he has so many different lenses that he looks through all at once. But eventually they push each student to kind of get, through the process of the class, every single student hits their mark and then eventually, like, gets in stride and runs with everybody else. Um, but he's incredibly talented. He I really enjoy. Personally had no idea that he had children, so it's really nice to kind
What?
of see the two sides of him. That's probably the best thing. Is as soon as I like learned that he had children and we started talking about them, the two sides of Chef McGuire are completely different. Um, and that's probably was my biggest surprise about him. But again, I had no preconceptions about him at all. I mean, he loves to, try and he likes to address the misconceptions about him, or the preconceptions, I'll say, about him, to every student that come to class. Like, I know you've heard about me, this and that. I truthfully had not heard a single thing about Chef McGuire. So I've curated my opinion about him just based on my, relationship with him as my clinical educator.
And he's a ghost. Like you can't even find anything
You
about
can't
him
find him.
on the internet, any places he's worked. He doesn't have a
Ah,
bio. He literally lives off the grid. So
he's it's so incredible how he does that. He says it to everybody. Like, even if he's in a photo, or if he sees a photo being taken of him, he'll duck. He like has to get out of the way, and he's like, "You're not posting that on social media, are you? Uh, you can't post that on social media." But then what's really funny is that he does have Instagram, but it's not under his name. I think he has the login to like the JWU pop up Instagram. So if you actually go in, you can see that the JWU pop up Instagram follows like a couple hundred people, and it's really just different restaurants that Chef McGuire follows and likes. So it's just funny. Every once in a while, it's very comical to think about how I can, Chef McGuire is using that on his phone.
you're
So
giving away all his secrets right
I
now.
know, I
Yeah.
know, it's crazy.
Yeah.
But no, that too. He's a ghost. He's so like off grid, but it's crazy how, like, in tune with, modern trends and things that are happening in the culinary world that he is, especially because he doesn't have those platforms.
Yeah, I think that going into my experiences with Chef Matheny, like I said prior, I had never had her, but I had definitely kind of heard whispers through my peers that she was kind of intimidating and kind very tough and kind of scary in the classroom. So I was a bit nervous, like putting myself in her classroom and being around her, but that could not be further from the truth. She is one of the most friendly, encouraging, kind chefs that I have ever had the experience of working with. And I think what happens is that along the way, it gets misconstrued like being tough on your students because you know what they're capable of and you want to push them to be their best selves. I think depending on the student, they can kind of take that the wrong way of a chef being too tough on them or a chef being too harsh, or maybe the chef doesn't like them that much. So they're going to go around and flip it around and say that they didn't like that chef. But it's just very clear that she wants her students to put out their best work. And I feel like that has kind of garnered her this reputation of being kind of intimidating. But when you really get to know her, like sometimes we'll be at the front of the room and people probably think we're having a really serious conversation, but like she's telling me about the movies she watched over the weekend, or she's asking me about what books I'm reading. She got me a Kindle. Like she had a spare Kindle laying around her house that no one used anymore. So she just gave it to me because we bonded over talking about books. And I feel like that just really shows like the selfless, kind person that she is.
You both
Yeah, yeah, no, chef.
go right ahead.
I agree. This the something that like I again really didn't know about Chef McGuire was like this, I guess, idea of how stern and like stern he was about like towards the students. But like you said it perfectly, Emma. It's it comes down to like having the highest expectations for your students and knowing that they can achieve that because they're at Johnson and Wales is the
Mhm.
truth.
You both kind of spoke to misconceptions at the beginning there about your chefs, but I'm curious about misconceptions about the MAT program or teaching in general that you might have had coming in that have been completely debunked, or maybe they've been proven right.
It's not a misconception I had, but one I've heard is that everyone thinks that teaching is like easy. Is that like teaching is, I've heard the phrase like, if you can't do, you
You
teach, which
teach.
could not be further from the truth, because to be able to teach something, you need to be an expert at what you're teaching. And this program has only showed me like, yeah, it's hard work, and like writing the lesson plans and the 6-page template, like all that is pretty tedious, but it's worth it in the end because it prepares you to be able to pivot for any possible scenario in the classroom. And that has happened more times than I can count. And I guess it could be considered a misconception, but because I'm coming off into this program so quickly after being an undergrad student myself, I didn't think that there was room for such like misunderstanding in the class and opportunities for students to kind of be confused, because we spend so much time like creating lesson plans and creating material, and we think we've done such a great job and it's so clear, and then a student comes up to you and they're like, oh, I don't really understand kind of like what you're asking me to do, or kind of what this method of prep is saying, so can you just kind of explain this to me a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is that I was going to say the exact same quote Emma said. It goes a little further, and I'm not trying to knock anybody out there, but I think that the quote that I've heard is, if you can't do, you teach, and if you can't teach, you teach gym. Um, but again, I'm not knocking the PE teachers out there. But that was totally a misconception that I had too, or that I kind of battled through was, feeling like I needed to know everything to teach, students that were only a couple years younger than I was,
Yeah.
some who are much older than I am. But I realized that the facilitation of an environment, the facilitation of knowledge is way more important than if you have the knowledge, because again, like not everyone knows everything. I don't think there's anybody at Johnson Wales who knows everything. I don't think it's possible.
Mhm.
And being able to collaborate with your students and the environment around you is what's incredibly important. Um, I also what amazed me the most was to see how intentional some of the I want to say tricks. I don't know if there's a better word, but I want to say tricks that I fell for as a student. Now that I get to now see and use on students to kind of get them to understand or get them to buy into a mentality or whatever it might be, that I always just thought were like a chef being incredibly personable with me, or giving me a tidbit of information here or there, and I'm like, wow, like they did that on purpose, and it worked, and that's reflecting on me as a student so quickly as a future educator has really helped my own practice.
Yeah, and Griffin, you mentioned something important about how I feel like you and I both have kind of struggled with the idea of teaching people who are so close to us in age. And I know that we've had this conversation with our fellow
Mhm.
MAT students a lot. And I think we have all suffered a lot of imposter syndrome, especially those of us who decided to go the higher education route and do our student teaching here at Johnson and Wales. Because, like you said, it creates a lot of doubt when you're pretending that you're an expert at a topic and you're trying to teach it to someone who's only 1 or 2 years younger than you. Or I had some freshmen this year in my foundations class who were years older than me. But
Mhm.
one thing that I found, and hopefully this was the same for you, Griffin, is that the students don't care, and it's not even something they think about. They Some of them asked me what my age was, and when I told them, they were really surprised at how
Yeah.
young I was. And I think that it never even occurred to them to think about how old I was. They saw me at the front of the class. They saw the level of respect that my clinical educator had for me, and immediately they saw me as a teacher and as a professional in the classroom.
Absolutely.
I want to go back a little bit because I think that Emma and Griffin, what you're talking about is it's so full circle because like in one way, like being young puts you in a position where you do have this fear of like, oh my god, I'm not experienced enough to teach. I might not know enough. But also on the flip side, being young and in my experience, like having struggled with this since I started Johnson and Wales, is you're connected more with the students. You're more in line with their way of thinking, their sort of interaction with pop culture. I mean, you're more in their generational scope. But regardless of whether or not you start teaching at a young age or, like Jamie and I, you go out in the industry a little bit and you come back, there's things within the kitchen or within the culinary classroom that can really scare you. What do you
Mhm.
feel are some of those fears you still have, having only started out your career? Is there anything that still intimidates you in the kitchen or in the classroom that you think will come easier over time?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak towards that. I think Em will probably have a similar answer, but like, the deep smarts of the industry, things that happen that you can only get from experience, like when the rationale oven breaks, how do you fix it? Or when a gas line starts to leak, how do you fix it? Those like specific technical kind of tidbits of information that you get from the industry, um, or any experience, right? Are kind of the things that feed that imposter syndrome a bit, because I feel like that's where they come out the most. Because you know, in some aspects, I have to say, I don't know. Let's figure it out together, and I try and hu- like basically humanize myself, so that students feel a lot safer in class. Because I like to say this a lot, and if any of my students end up listening to this, I always say, like, I'm just a guy. There's nothing to it more than that. Of course I have information, and of course I facilitate some things here and there, but um, there's not much to it past that, and that's really important for students to understand, in my opinion, is that just because I don't know something doesn't mean I'm any more or less of a person. Um, it just gives us a chance to kind of bond together and grow, which is, I think, again, kind of brings it full circle. So I don't know if I'm scared of them, because I think that they'll happen regardless. Until I know everything, which I don't think I'll ever will. I'll definitely be fearful of, well, what happens if I screw this demo up, or what happens if you know I forgot to order this rec.
Mm.
Things like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
those
So,
one.
but Griffin,
That second one is a little bit more crazy.
but Griffin, what you're talking about, and I don't think maybe you don't know this, and I hope, and if you don't, that's even better.
Mhm.
But like what you're talking about is something that it takes teachers years to realize. It
Of
doesn't
course,
fucking matter. Like at the end of the
the
Yeah.
present.
day,
Yeah.
like humanizing yourself is far more important than going into a classroom with 30 years of experience and acting like you know more. Because students will eat you alive. You might
Yeah.
demonstrate the right technique, but ultimately you're gonna be a dick. You're just not gonna get the respect of the
Yeah.
students. And like, trust me, as someone who had growing pains when I first started teaching, like that was a tough lesson to learn. That your
Mhm.
experience is is just that. It's experience. It doesn't make you a better teacher. And I think that what you're
Yeah. Agreed.
describing is far beyond what you might give it credit for.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Emma, is there anything you want to add? Sorry, I kind of cut you
Yeah.
off.
No, it's okay. I was just kind of going to go off of what Griffin said about humanizing. And I think what's really helped me in the classroom is that when the students come up to me and they ask me a question, I don't and I don't know the answer, I'm very open about the fact that I don't know the answer. And I say, I'm not sure. Let me go check with chef, or let me go ask chef. And I think that, again, like, kind of humanizes me and humbles me a bit in the eyes of the student. And I think also in turn, it makes them more comfortable, because it makes them realize, okay, this person who has similar experiences with me, is close in age to me, they don't know something and they're not ashamed or embarrassed about it. I think that kind of makes them feel better about having questions and having misunderstandings. And one of our biggest mottos in our class is that ask as many questions as you can, because this is not a job, this is school. You are
Mhm.
here to learn. It's okay to mess up. It's okay to ask questions. And like Griffin said about the industry being kind of gruesome and gritty, I think we're trying to encourage people to realize that although we are preparing you to go into that industry, you're still in school. And, if you ask me a question or if you mess something up, I'm not going to yell at you. I'm not going to berate you. I'm going to answer your question, and I'm going to help you because I want you to learn.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that when I had both of you in class, we talked a lot about this. We
Mhm.
talked a lot about how just to humanize yourself, and things are going to go wrong. And I mess up demos all the time. I say the wrong words. I
Mm-hmm.
constantly. And it's just who I am now. It's like, well, this happens. Let's move on. So I'm curious, you both are in your last few days of student teaching, which is insane. You're great. You're getting ready to graduate, and you've been doing demos and you've been working with students. Have you had any like funny or embarrassing moments that you just think back and you just like laugh about? Or are you not laughing about it yet? Is it still too
Oh,
raw?
I'm laughing about it. Like, we even, Griffin and I just had to submit this like 45-minute student teaching video. And if I messed something up, I kept it in the video, because like that's real life. So right now we're teaching the senior baking and pastry capstone class. And the way that class is structured is there's no kind of whole group, whole class demonstrations. Students call us to their table when they need a specific demonstration, and a lot of those demonstrations have to do with like glazing and transferring like petit gâteaux like to the boards and to the products. And I have probably dropped one almost every time I've done a demo. I just pick it up and it just plops right over. So I just
Oh,
say,
every time I try to do that, yeah.
every time, and I'm like, I'm walking them through my process, I'm speaking out loud as I'm telling them what I'm doing. So I'm like, okay, I'm glazing it, now I'm tapping the rack, now I'm picking it up, and then it falls over, and I go, okay, now don't do that when you do it. But it's just the nature, it's the belly of the beast, and you just have to roll with it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I drop a lot of stuff. I can be pretty clumsy when it comes to like transporting some things. We have the Ivario tilt skillet in our room, that entire machine is just a disaster waiting to happen. Yeah. um, and I mean, it has its perks, and we use it the way we can, but I've definitely overpoured a couple things here or there or whatnot. Um, but yeah, like, especially when you get into like these weird gastronomic techniques using ISI containers, making foams, making gels, all these things, it's always bound to go wrong because there's so many variables. I had students trying to make patafouilles today that ended up going down to Chef Schick, and that was a disaster. And she's nodding her head. But again, it's the perfect example to show students, they're in school, and like you all said it earlier before, trying to gap this like industry chef to educator is like probably the hardest thing. I feel like every MAT student has had to kind of realize and figure out. And I'm sure for both of you as well, how to take yourself out of the industry and say, oh, if a student does this wrong, I'm not supposed to yell at them. They don't know better. I have to teach them. And
Mm-hmm.
that's been a really fun experience. And I think that as soon as students actually hear you say that out loud, their attitude towards coming to class change. And again, it makes the whole experience so much better.
I'm just gonna piggyback on that pat de fouille today. It was like literally like Elmer's glue. It was like Play-Doh. It was
It was
like
crazy.
the weirdest thing
No.
I have ever seen. But we
Yeah.
fixed it. We fixed it.
Oh,
We
and
got
they
to the
came
root of
out.
it.
They came
But
out
yeah.
beautifully. It was quite a good one.
So on the idea of fixing, um, talk about like education in general. I mean, you're so new to this career, and I'm sure wherever you go, you're going to really make huge waves. What do you think in culinary education needs fixing? Like, is it good the way it is? Have you seen things that you think are in need of change to help? I'm going to use an overused word, but to help sustain us as a sort of a viable resource for people who want to get training.
I think that there's not one right answer. I think it probably depends a bit on the program and the curriculum. Like, I think personally, the pastry program needs a class, kind of like the fine dining class, where students get the real experience of like being on the line and getting tickets and having to fire orders. Because the closest experience I had to that was my junior year was with Chef Schick's chef's table plated dessert class, and that was prior to the semester switch and prior to the curriculum change. So I'm not fully confident in what that class looks like now. And I feel like we kind of dip our toe in the water a little bit with having buffets and having harsh deadlines on when students need to have their product out. But even in that scenario, they have 2, 3, 4 hours to finish it. And I just feel like a lot of students, myself included, come out of this program wanting to be plated dessert chefs, wanting to be out in the restaurant industry. But I feel like our program kind of lacks that real world, authentic experience for them.
Yeah, no, I think I've heard Emma say that numerous times, and I totally see it as a like white space for sure. Um, Again, and it's such a hard thing because there's no right or wrong answer. Um, I would love to see culinary education move away from like French basics because it's like
Don't let Eric Repair hear you say that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Good thing he's long
He's gone.
gone. But you know, it's there are so many other cultures and cuisines that do the exact same things that show you so many more capabilities and possibilities. And I mean, um, you see it as an issue in Johnson and Wales staff about the diversity in Johnson and Wales staff, but you also see it in the diversity of basically majority of kitchens and kitchen classrooms. I just think that bridging this cultural competency on top of cuisine could really push people to want to learn more about other people because again food is one of those things, if not the best example of the one thing that brings everybody together. Everybody has to eat, and a stove's a stove,
Mm-hmm.
regardless if it has a sautoir or a wok on it. So I mean, just based on my our microcosm at Johnson Wales, I would love to see like the expulsion of grades go away, but that's a
Yeah,
can that's
that's
a
a big
can
can of
that's
worms.
I don't
That's a
know
whole
if it's
nother
worth
podcast
opening.
on why grades don't
Yeah,
matter.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Why grades don't matter, and why are we using a standards based grading system when we give students traditional percentage grades? It's a whole deal for sure.
And the product that we're producing was not designed to be graded on a standard-based rubric. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, but what you're
Um,
describing is the challenge in traditional education formats versus what we are, which is essentially
Like
we're
put
designed to
into a
yeah,
culinary.
we're designed to
Yeah.
be competency based, where once you achieve a skill,
mhm.
then you can move on. But that doesn't align with traditional, U.S. education format, which is, I mean, those are challenges you will face when you eventually land wherever you land in whatever school. Like you're gonna have to like not combat, but you're going to have to like navigate around these sort of institutional barriers, which can make your life challenging, especially as someone who's coming into the industry hungry and wants to, make change. They want to add, a plated dessert component to a restaurant, which Emma, I agree with you. We should definitely have a restaurant. Or they want to have less emphasis on sort of traditional French techniques, albeit important. I think they should be celebrated equally with other cultures. Griffin, I agree with you, but I
Yeah.
feel like there's a lot of history and there's a lot of tradition that's going to stand in your way. But you should definitely push because Jamie would agree with me. Change is good, and I know I've spoken with both of you before. It's like
Hmm.
make your own destiny and push for whatever you feel like you think is right. And if you get it, you get it, and if not, keep pushing.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Yeah, no, change is hard, but I think we need to evolve with the with the times, even if I'm a little slow because I like
Mhm.
routine. But change is a good thing, and I think that both of you are very passionate and inspiring, and I think that the next generation of chefs that you'll be teaching are very lucky to have either of you as their chef. So I want to thank you so much for sharing your passion about culinary education with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you so much. And believe it or not, we have been incredibly lucky to have both of you.
Yeah,
I
I
didn't
agree.
have either of you in class.
Yeah, but we've had
Well,
plenty of interactions at
we've
least in the
seen you
last
around.
week.
Yeah.
Anyway, I like to.
Well, it's our pleasure. It is our pleasure. And it sounds
Absolutely.
like we have a part two to talk
Yeah,
about. Maybe
apparently.
after you guys are in the industry, maybe next year we'll revisit and see what you
That'd
guys
be
are up
great.
to a year later.
Yeah, that would be great.
I look forward to it. Thank you so much.